Hello again. I'm here with a author spotlight for Nick Cutter. Now, Nick Cutter is an alias for, I believe it's Craig Davidson, I believe is his name. And he has done 4 books under the Nick Cutter alias. This is basically a horror author. The one book that everyone talks about is The Troop. But to be honest with you, The Troop is my 3rd favorite Nick Cutter story right now, compared to the other 3 Nick Cutter books. So, well, the other 3. This is the one I don't like, but I'll get to that later. So, the first one I'm going to talk about, obviously the one I like the most, is Little Heaven. Now, let me read what Little Heaven was about. A trio of mismatched mercenaries, Mika Shugru, Minerva Atwater, and Ebenezer Elkins, colloquially known as the Englishmen, is hired by young Ellen Belhaven for a deceptively simple task: check in on her nephew, who may have been taken against his will to a remote New Mexican backwoods settlement called Little Heaven, where a clandestine religious cult holds sway. But shortly after they arrive, things begin to turn ominous. There are stirrings in the woods and over the treetops, and above all else, the brooding shape of a monolith known as the Black Rock exists. Cast its terrible pull. Excuse me. Paranoia and distrust soon grip the settlement. Escape routes are gradually cut off as events spiral towards madness. Hell, or the closest thing to it, invades Little Heaven. All present here are now forced to take a stand and fight back. But whatever has set its dark eye on Little Heaven is marshalling its powers, and it wants them all. Okay. This kind of takes the concept with kids that the Troop had, and he this is a very long book in scope. It's multiple years. Like, here's a prologue. It's taken 1980, and beginning 1965. So it spans a longer time than any of his other books, I believe. And I really liked it. I really enjoyed the book. It's been a while since I've read this book, so I can't remember everything about it, but I do remember I really enjoyed it. It was the first book that I read by Nick Cutter because I got it in my Nocturnal Reader's box. But I do remember that I really enjoy the scope and magnitude of it. It's a little weird. And one thing about Nick Cutter, if you are going to read Nick Cutter, he does seem to have issues with animal cruelty, I guess. I know at least in these 3 books, I forgot if there was one. I believe there was some in Little Heaven as well. Or at least issues with animal experimentation or cruelty or some kind of issue with animals. So I know some of my people who watch my videos have commented, or one person I remember commented about it, about how they didn't like animal cruelty in books. And if you do have an issue with that, you probably should stay away from Nick Cutter books. Not that it's a big part of his story, but usually there is at least 1 or 2 scenes of some kind of issues with animals in his books. But like I said, my favorite book really was Little Heaven. I really liked the way it was written. I liked even this book itself has nice illustrations in it and stuff. It's just a well done book. I think it's my favorite book from Nick Cutter. It was Little Heaven. My next favorite book actually was one I just read, which was The Deep. I really enjoyed this book. I'll read what this is about. A strange plague called the Gets is decimating humanity on a global scale. It causes people to forget small things at first, like where they left their keys, then the not so small things like how to drive or the letters of the alphabet. Then their bodies forget how to function involuntarily, and there is no cure. But now, far below the surface of the Pacific Ocean, deep in the Mariana Trench, a heretofore unknown substance hailed as ambrosia has been discovered. A universal healer from initial reports. It may just be the key to a cure. In order to study this phenomenon, a special research lab, the Trist, has been built 8 miles under the sea surface, but now the station is incommunicado and it's up to a brave few to descend through the lightless fathoms in hopes of unraveling the mysterious lurkings at this crushing depth, and perhaps to encounter an evil blacker than anything one could possibly imagine. Part horror, part psychological nightmare, The Deep is a novel that fans of Stephen King and Clive Barker won't want to miss, especially if they're afraid of the dark. So the way this story goes is, first off, the Gets. This is the actual virus, I guess, that's plaguing mankind. An Alzheimer's disease, basically, but it affects everybody. So he talks about how kids get it, how regular teenage adults get it, and how he details really well how it affects these people. How now suddenly little Chrissy forgets the alphabet, or then she'll forget her brother's name, and then suddenly they forget how to breathe. And it's really good at that point. That's kind of like the setup. Like, okay, here's these characters and this big world crisis. And then the main character in the book, which I kind of forgot his name, actually, but the main character in the book has an issue where I believe he lost a son. And as he goes down into this research facility, they kind of become, it's a claustrophobic kind of trapped feeling, kind of like an Aliens movie in a way, where they're trapped in this underwater, miles underwater research facility, and there's this entity there, and it becomes kind of surreal, which I do like. I love the whole concept of surrealism, I guess, in horror, where suddenly your reality is kind of bent and you're not really sure what's real and what's not real, and a lot of mind games in here. Like, I do talk about, like, The Shining, I think, in this, or The Abyss Beast of Shining is one of the taglines here. It kind of is in a way like that, but it plays on this guy's loss of his child and some things that happened to him when he was younger. And like I said, you don't know what's real, what's not real. You don't know what this entity is. And when you find out, it's very creepy. The more you get into the book, this is probably even more than Little Heaven. This is a really creepy book, and I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I would give this 4 stars, definitely. I would give all. The only book I wouldn't like is the last one, but I'd probably give all of these books probably like 4 stars, I think. Like I said, Little Heaven's my favorite because I just read that as my first Nick Cutter, but The Deep is definitely my second. If you like stories that have that kind of surrealism, kind of like reality bending type of things, and kind of like a weird ancient evil, because that's what this really is, an ancient evil. I don't want to get too deep into what it is, but they don't even in the book they actually don't even explain too well what it is. They just kind of, they do at the end tell you a little bit more, but it's pretty creepy. And like I said, this is a really top-notch Nick Cutter book. I've already talked about The Troop. I know some people didn't like The Troop. It is gross, and so is The Deep. The Deep has some gross scenes in it, especially in the beginning. There's, I think, they're not cicadas. I forgot the word. Some kind of bugs that fall on this one person and start kind of like eating their skin, and because they're completely lost their mind, they really don't realize it. Oh, here it is. Mantises? The old man's head was covered in mantises. Okay, well, I don't want to get too deep into this book, but this is, like I said, I already like this book a lot. The third book, The Troop. Like I said, I know a lot of people didn't like The Troop. I did. It is a gross out horror, more gross out horror kind of than even in The Deep in a way, because The Deep is a little bit more detailed because it deals with the whole surrealism, and the evil is a lot more menacing than, say, than a giant super hungry worm, which is basically what The Troop is about. The Deep is a little bit more detailed, but The Troop I still liked. I really enjoyed it. I love the dynamics with the kids. I like the history with the kids, which is why I like that Little Heaven. I feel like he started with the kids in The Troop, and Little Heaven kind of has a lot of kid issues here, or at least one major one, and it really does improve on what he did with the Troop. But again, like I said, the Troop, I'm bouncing all over the place here, but the Troop is a good book. It's not as good as the other two, though. I mean, I would definitely, probably start with like the Little Heaven and the Deep before I would pick up the Troop. The other book, unfortunately, it seems like this has been a pattern for me. This book, Acolyte, I already did a review on this book, and I didn't like it, really. I think, did I give it like 3 stars or something? I'm probably being generous, to be honest with you, because it started really good. This was a complete departure, in a way, than his other books. This one was a lot different, because it was kind of like just uncomfortable reading, not even like horror reading, like really horrible issues and horrible religious issues that they dealt with here, as far as religious persecution and police brutality and sexism, racism. A lot of things were dealt with in the beginning of this book that would probably be trigger warnings for a lot of people. And then they kind of just dropped the ball on this book. It just kind of just became the typical, oh my God, I'm in this system, I'm in this society, and now I'm trying to take down the system type thing, like a Minority Report or anything else. And it just kind of, to me, just went off the rails. And so this is probably the one book out of the 4 by Nick Cutter that I wouldn't suggest. But like I said, if you want something that's large in scope, as far as decades large in scope and detail, pick up Little Heaven. If you are interested in something surreal and something that's deals with like an ancient evil and he plays around with reality and kind of messes with your mind, like a Clive Barker, like a Hellraiser type of thing, or like any kind of bending reality type of story, you probably would like The Deep. And again, if you just kind of like the gross out kind of humor, good gross out kind of horror, and the whole concept of children and I wouldn't say like a Lord of the Flies, but kind of a thing like that, as far as trying to survive in this kind of system, then that would be the Troop. And that would be my review of the 4 Nick Cutter books. I know I've gone long on this video. Sorry about that. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.